And that is that. Thank you very much. This morning we're making Huevos Rancheros, one of my favorite quick breakfasts, classic Mexican California cuisine. We have a couple people trickle in late. That's great. Thank you for waking up and joining me this morning. This is one of my favorite classes because I really do love breakfast foods, and I think that if you can make breakfast, you can survive in the world because it's great any time of day, and there's a really lot of, it's a good source of different kinds of proteins and veggies, and as we can see today, we're going to get a lot of different nutrients from a lot of different things. So we're going to be making our own quick pico de gallo. We're going to be making our own half homemade refried beans. We didn't make the beans. I didn't make the beans. I got a can of black beans. I chose black beans. The recipe says you can use pinto or black. That's the fun of this also, whichever one you prefer. And then if you have leftovers, which you might, then you can use it for other things, make a burrito later, or have some soft tacos for dinner, that kind of thing. It's really versatile. And then salsa, it says use your favorite salsa, because most of the time, a lot of people have salsa in their house already. If you just wanted to use a hot sauce or other kind of garnishes and just the pico de gallo, that would be okay also. I really like this. I'll show the Herdez. Can you see? Yeah. Brand. Oh, wow. There's such a delay on my phone. The roasted salsa. It's sort of like the authentic restaurant kind, which I really like. So the pico de gallo is more of a chunky, fresh, really lime heavy salsa, and we're going to use a slotted spoon for that, so it's not really watery. It's more about the tomatoes. So then this salsa is actually kind of more about like a sauce, salsa. And then we're going to be making fried eggs and warming up tortillas, and garnish is really up to you. I have some Monterey Jack cheese. I have some cotija cheese, which I really like. I'll show everybody at the end. And I have some avocado and definitely hot sauce. Gotta get spicy in the morning, right? So it's going to be pretty quick and fun. We're going to get everything to the point where it's all ready and waiting, and then we're going to assemble our dish, and hopefully you guys will all sit down and eat. So first will be our pico, and then, like I said, we'll get our refried beans done and move into the cooking aspect. All right. If you look through the recipe, we need about 1/4 cup of chopped onion for the pico, and then another 1/4 cup of chopped onion for the refried beans. So I'm going to chop all my onion first. I'm going to measure it out to be about 1/2 cup, and then use half and half. So I probably will only need about half this onion, but we'll see. I've got some really good tomatoes here from the farmer's market that are starting to get real soft, so I'm going to definitely use those up for salsa. That's a good way to get rid of something that you, not get rid of, but use something that you think might not last another few days. And then limes, I'm going to use fresh lime juice. If you have like a little bottle of lime juice, that's perfectly fine. I am not a snob about citrus juice. The fresher, the better, but as long as it's like lime juice, that's okay. It's going to taste perfectly fine. So if your limes are really, really hard, or you don't think that they're going to get much juice out, you see what I'm doing? I'm kind of pressing and rolling them against the countertop. That will help get them ready. So I'm just going to do that really quick and set them aside. I'm going to start with chopping the onions. As you can see, I've got it already cut in half with the root still attached on one end. I'm going to carefully, with one hand as my guide, chop through horizontally, not going all the way through into the root. I want to leave it intact, so it's kind of like a Pac-Man mouth, just cut through but still holding. Then I'm going to use the lines of the onion to guide me. Again, not cutting all the way through, leaving it intact a bit towards the back so that it holds itself together. We want to chop these pretty fine. I mean, I do. Pico de gallo, we're going to be eating this, as a raw salsa, so I prefer the onions to be chopped up nicely. If you like good chunky onion, have at it. That's really a personal thing. The other half of this onions that we're using, we're going to be sauteing with the beans and kind of mashing them up. So the more of a head start you give yourself in terms of getting them small, the better off. That's why we're chopping them kind of small today. So then across those cuts you just made, you're going to go down chopping down, and those layers of the onion are helping you, and you get all these nice, perfectly chopped small onion. If you want them even smaller, you can then go back through them with your knife and just chop it up. I'm just going to cut a little bit more away from that root because I don't want to waste it. All right, and then I got, I think, more than what I need here, half a cup. I'm just going to give it a little bit more of a chop. I want this really finely chopped. All right, I'm going to measure what I need. The rest I'm going to put in a little container. Oh, it might be pretty much what I need. A little bit extra. All right, so we've got onions for our salsa and for our refried beans. So we're going to chop our tomatoes next. Let me just set this aside. Tomatoes, whether it's cherry tomatoes, big tomatoes, hothouse red tomatoes, or rustic heirloom tomatoes, I always recommend using a serrated knife. They sell tomato knives, and they usually have a very saw-like, sharp tooth kind of an image, and that's my internet connection is unstable. I'm sorry about that. I think that everybody in my building is doing their Zoom meeting at this time of the morning sometimes. So if I go out or if I get wonky, you can just unmute yourself and let me know if anything is wrong. We have a small enough group today. If you have any questions, just temporarily unmute yourself for a minute. Back to the knives, we want to use you do want to use a saw-like blade, but if you just have a regular bread knife, that's fine. You don't need to buy a special tomato knife. I'm going to cut them in around the core. I kind of want to get rid of the middle core where a lot of the seeds are. You can use all of that, but it just helps me to quickly cut the stem out by sort of cutting around the core of the tomato. And then you're left with just that teeny tiny interior, which we don't really want a lot of the water and seeds in this anyway. We're going to be spooning them out. So if you start out by taking some of that core out, you're helping yourself out. The rest is going to be a pretty rough chop. You can dice it nicely if you're worried about it, but I'm just going to kind of slice and dice and generally rough chop. I'm not worried about size. I mean, them matching. I just kind of want it to be a general, small enough little bit of tomato that when I put it on top of my eggs and tortilla later, it's not so big of a chunk that it's just gonna like roll off. I kind of want it to like sit in the food and incorporate. So the smaller the piece, the better for that. But at the same time, whatever works, right? See, these are very rough chopped. These tomatoes are almost falling apart. They're very ready to use, which is perfect. You don't have to do much work. Very simple in terms of chopping these. Don't worry about what they look like. It is all gonna get mixed together and look, you know, like a salsa. So almost done. If you were using different size tomatoes, Roma tomatoes would be really great. You would do the same thing. You just kind of cut them into a general plank, like a slice like that, and then you cut the slice into sticks, and then your sticks into dices. Or you can just kind of rough chop. That's the serrated knife, though, really helps you be able to saw through the tomato skin. If you have an incredibly sharp chef's knife, then that should also work. But most of the time, even a really sharp knife, the tomato skin can prove to be almost impenetrable. It's very annoying, it'll tear, and so giving it just a tiny bit of a sawing action really helps you also keep it as firm as it can be. These are not going to be very firm, my tomatoes here, but if you were to use a chef's knife and just push down on it, then you're mashing your tomatoes. Being able to kind of saw through it a little bit keeps them kind of nice and firm and whole. I'm just going to use my towel and clean up some of that tomato water there so I can keep working. So we have a bowl of lovely chopped tomatoes. I'm going to be adding half of the onions that we chopped. We need the other half for our refried beans. If you read the full recipe, you see later on when we go to serve this salsa, we want to use a slotted spoon so that we can kind of reserve some of the water from coming onto our food. So I'm just going to use that same slotted spoon to mix it so that I am saving my trouble on dishes, as you know, my least favorite thing. So why not use that same slotted spoon? So I've got half of my onions, so that's a 1/4 cup of nice finely chopped onions. That's about, what was the measurement of tomatoes? It was 2 medium tomatoes. That's sort of a loose term, but between medium and large, you're going for about 2 cups of chopped tomato. And then I'm going to go for about 2 tablespoons of lime juice. That depends on how squeezable and juicy your limes are. That really varies from lime to lime. So you kind of have to guess, but it's probably about 1 to 2 limes. I'm going to actually get my measuring spoon and just squeeze right into that. Just get a sort of loose idea, general, that I'm getting more or less what I'm going for. This is, I'm lucky, a nice juicy lime. I'm getting almost a full tablespoon out of just 1/2. So I might be good. Yep, 1 tablespoon. I'm going to get what I need, 2 tablespoons out of just 1 lime. It really depends on your limes or the size of them and the juiciness of them. I think really pushing on them, kind of massaging them to start with before you try this really helps. If you have a juice squeezer, if you have like one of those bar squeezers or a juicer, fantastic. I like to work out my hands in the morning. Okay, 2 tablespoons of lime juice. We're going to add some salt, preferably like a good sea salt or a kosher salt. We're not adding black pepper to this. It traditionally doesn't have it. Well, not for this dish. We're going to add pepper later on, but that was just about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. The salt is going to actually bring out even more of the water from the tomatoes and the onions themselves. It's going to all blend together. But you see how liquidy it is? It's very soupy, and so that's why later on we're going to want to use that slotted spoon to get it, mostly we want the tomato and onion actually onto our food. All right, moving on, we want to start our refried beans. So I've got a pot here. The salsa we're just going to set aside. If you want to put it in the fridge, that's fine. I'm just going to leave it at room temp and let it kind of marinate in itself. Over here off to the side. Refried bean land. We are going to use a sauce pot. I'm using one that's maybe a little bit bigger, but I would rather it not be overflowing because we're going to be kind of working these beans, mashing them up inside of the pot. So we want to have enough room and space to do that without making a big mess. I'm going to readjust the camera because at this point, I believe most of the rest of this is going to be on the stove top. I want you to be able to see well. Excuse me. Okay. I think that, I did this yesterday. I'm going to raise you up a little bit higher. Just because then you can kind of see down into the pot. Does that help? I think that's going to help. Yeah. So we've got our sauce pot. We're going to go on high heat to start with to get it hot. We're going to ha-ha our pan. If you've been with me before, you're laughing at me because it's dorky but memorable. You want to heat the pan and the oil, heat the oil, add the food. We're doing that in this process as well. It's going to be a quick ha-ha. I can't help but laugh. I can't. It's been 16 years since I heard that in culinary school, and wow, ha-ha your pan. So we're going to add just about these are refried beans, so they're a little heavier on the oil, which is why we're going to be using a really good healthy oil. Extra virgin olive oil is what we prefer for this. If you have a canola or a vegetable, that's good and neutral and healthy as well. But it's about 2 tablespoons of the oil to start with. And then we're going to let that heat up just a second or two, let it get warm before we add everything. We're going to add in our onion, and we're going to let that sweat out, saute a little bit. So we can turn the heat now down to medium. We don't want to scorch our onions. We're just going to try to sweat them out into the oil and get that all flavorful. And then to that, we're going to be adding our cumin and salt. I have that over here in my little seasoning packet. I love cumin. I use it so much. I keep it in my ready-to-go caddy next to the oven. Cumin is wonderful in North African, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, Mexican, all Latin American food. It's just a very versatile spice. If you have anything, have ground cumin in your life. So we're going to bloom the spice in the oil before we even add the beans. Blooming means letting the spice kind of saute a little bit and become fragrant. We're blooming it. Isn't that a nice kind of image? And then we're going to add the beans to all of this. So we've got our nicely finely chopped onions going into our very warm oil. You can tell that it started to cook and sizzle right away. We don't want to be putting our food into cold oil and then trying to wait for it to get hot. We're going to get like steamed onions in oil, which is sounds fancy, but I don't know. So I'm going to be adding to this my cumin, letting this saute. Basically, when you can smell the food, then you know it's progressed to the next level of cooking. So where is my teaspoon? The cumin, we're just going with 1 full teaspoon of cumin and then about a quarter teaspoon of salt, which is about a pinch of salt. But this cumin is going to give us a lot of our flavor in our refried beans. So it's a full teaspoon of cumin. You want to get that into the oil so that it, like we said, blooms and really becomes fragrant and kind of toasts up a little bit. Stir that around, get the onions all coated. And then to this, we're going to be adding our beans. If you got pinto, if you got black, if what you know, you can make refried beans out of any kind of bean. So it's just more traditionally they use pinto and black beans. I've got black beans. You want to always try to look for low sodium if you can. And always, even the low sodium, you want to drain them really well and rinse them under cold water until the water runs clear. When the water is running clear, then they're fine and you've rinsed off all of that extra stuff that comes in the can, which you don't want to put into your food. So I've got my beans here drained and rinsed. I'm going to add those into the pot. Make sure I'm at the right point. Oh, that's funny. I didn't notice this. I have a typo in the recipe. You're going to pout in the beans and water. You can pout if you want, but I hope you don't. We're having fun here. We're going to pour in the beans, and we're going to add, what is that, a quarter cup of water. You're going to cover this and let it cook for about 5 minutes. Make sure that it's well mixed and that water is kind of spread out. Cover it so that it doesn't cook away, but you want it to be on that medium heat. You want it to still be kind of simmering inside the pot. If it sounds like it's simmering too high, or you can lift the lid and check on it, and if it's cooked away too much of the water, turn it down to low. We're trying to not cook away all of the water completely yet, but it's cooking into the beans, and kind of the oil and water are both absorbing into the beans as they cook and steam inside there for just a few minutes. The beans obviously are already cooked. They came in a can, so, or hopefully maybe you cooked them yourself. That's awesome. And so they don't actually need to cook. We're just absorbing them with all the liquid, and then this is the refrying process. You could cook them in a saute pan with traditionally lard, and then you would add water and lime juice and mash them all up together. This is sort of the quick version with much healthier fat content. So that's going to cook. We can, in the process, we have some other things that we need to get ready and going. I'm not going to get too distracted though, because this is only a few minute process for the beans. So all I'm going to do is get my salsa going. If you want to heat yours up in the microwave, perfectly fine. Put it in a microwave safe bowl and maybe lay a paper towel over the top, because it might fit or splatter inside your microwave, just to keep it clean. And warm it in like 30-second intervals, stirring it up until it's kind of hot. I'm just going to use a teeny tiny pot over here and warm up the salsa. The recipe calls for 1.5 cups. This is a main sauce. If you're making 4 servings of this, then go for it. I'm making 2 servings today. I'm just going to do 2 fried eggs. And so I'm going to limit my salsa here to more like 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup. Going to be plenty of sauce for my my serving, which you will all see at the end. You can get that going if you're doing it stovetop like me. You want it on a low heat, because it's just going to sit here and get warm while we're doing other things. You can have a spoon ready to occasionally stir it, just so that it's not sticking and burning, but it's just going to get kind of warm. You don't need it to be piping hot, boiling salsa. That would it would scorch and burn and reduce, which for this dish is not what we're going for. So I'm going to check my beans. Always lift a lid away from your face when you're lifting a hot lid off of something. That steam is going to be an issue. And if it has water dripping from it, then you can try to avoid that on your arms. So try to always lift things away from you. Remember that. You can use a potato masher. You can use a fork. I'm going to use a whisk because I like that I can mash and stir at the same time. So you're not trying to completely pulverize all the beans. We're mashing at about half of the beans. You want it to kind of remain a little chunky. You can leave them incredibly chunky, and then that would be more like smashed beans. For this refried, I'm going to go for a little bit more of pasty, beans with some chunks left in it. Definitely a preference thing. You can, I just like that it then becomes the glue. It's easily spreadable on the tortilla, and it kind of holds everything together the more mashed up it is. Plus, then if I have leftovers, which I think I will, I'm going to make some chicken tacos later, and I can just spread it on there and griddle it and make them. Anyway, I'll show pictures of that too. Okay, so the water is mostly cooked down. I'm going to turn this all the way to low. I have mashed it to my preference of mashing. I think you can see that. I know it's steamy, but got some good mashing, but there's still some good chunky black beans in there. We want to turn the heat off completely. We're going to add some black pepper, very personal preference to taste. I'm just going with 1 little pinch. It can really alter the flavor of food, black pepper, like in a good way for some things, and then other things, it starts to taste more of that than what you originally wanted it to. We want to add lime. This is about 1/2 teaspoon of lime. So we saw that I got a tablespoon of lime juice from 1/2 of a lime, and its tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. So I'm just going to use like 1/3 of that 1/2 of a lime. Squeeze that in. That's also preference. You can make your beans extra limey if you want. It's only good for you. You're only adding more vitamin C and good stuff into your food. It's delicious flavor. It's really fresh in the morning to have that kind of citrus burst. So if you like lime, don't let me hold you back. All right, so I've added my lime juice. I've added a little bit of pepper. I'm going to taste it now. If it needs a teeny tiny bit of salt, then I will add that. But you don't want to overly salt beans. They really absorb seasoning well, so you want to be careful, and that's why we do it at the end. Question. So I send the recipes out in advance if you register for the class. They were attached to the email that I sent last week, and then I think that I attached it again to the reminder email. I hope I did. If I didn't, I'm sorry. But yeah, I send the recipe out in the email. So if you are a registered class participant and your email is on the list, you should have gotten it. And if you didn't, then let's talk after class and we'll resolve that issue. So I've got, these are very well seasoned. That tasted really excellent. I was eating it while I was answering that question. I think I might add a little bit more lime because I do like limey food. I also love the history of that word, calling British sailors limeys, because they used to have to drink lime juice and eat limes to try to help not die. Anyway, I've got my good flavored beans. I'm gonna set these aside. I'm gonna put the lid back on because as they sit here waiting for us, I want them to stay hot and I want them to not dry out. If they do get a little bit dry looking before we're done, then we just add maybe a splash of water or another splash of lime juice, and that will refreshen them. But I want to definitely keep them warm. So I'm going to keep the lid on and set them back here where they'll stay hot. Checking my salsa. Very, very, very tepidly coming up to a nice warm temperature, which is perfect. So back here I've got some foil already ready to go, and I've got a platter, which we're going to use later on. The foil is because we're going to be warming our tortillas in this skillet. And then I keep them warm by wrapping them up in foil. I don't think that I put that on the recipe. You can immediately, when they're warm, spread them with the beans and then set that whole thing aside and keep that warm until you're ready to fry the eggs. I'm going to warm the tortillas, wrap the tortillas, and then have everything warm and ready to build at the end when the eggs are ready. So I've got my foil for when I wrap up the tortillas. I'm only making 2, like I said, so I only need 2 tortillas. You get your skillet hot. You can do this right on the fire. A lot of people, especially with flour tortillas, that's a nice way to get a little bit of a char flavor on your tortilla by just warming it up right on the flame. You just put the tortilla right down and then use tongs to kind of flip it. But we're going to use our skillet today. It's just a little bit safer and more consistent heat, and then we're not getting a scorch. We don't really want a charred tortilla for this purpose. We just want it to be nice and warm and soft. You can add a little bit of oil to this pan, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon of canola oil if you're using like a skillet that's not a very good nonstick. Since my nonstick is a very good nonstick, I don't need any fat and I don't really want to be frying the tortillas. I just want to get them warm so that they are really, really pliable and soft and maneuverable and they don't break when I bend them. And obviously I don't want to eat cold tortillas for breakfast. I want to eat hot tortillas. Okay, so I'm getting some bubbling action in my salsa, which means it is hot. I'm trying to turn that off. Make sure I stir it up so there was no burning, sticking spots. No, looks fantastic. Got hot salsa ready. Got my hot beans ready. I'm about to have my hot tortillas ready. So then after that, we're going to be using this same nonstick skillet to make our fried eggs. This is another very personal preference kind of a situation when you get into frying eggs. I know some people, this people right here likes that yolk about as runny as possible. Like I want to be chasing it off my plate. Some other people like their yolk done. Good day. And that is fine. So when you're frying your eggs, you need to make them how you want to eat them. So if I make mine runny, then you just keep cooking yours a little bit longer. If you are not very good yet at flipping the eggs, it's been a few weeks since we did eggs, use that spatula to help, or put a lid on your skillet and that will help cook that yolk really, really solidly all the way through. Just some tricks. So my tortillas are feeling really nice and warm and soft now. You notice that I have asbestos pans and I can grab these with my fingers. Please don't feel like you have to impress anybody by doing that. Use some tongs or like a silicone spatula. Make sure your tongs are not sharp metal tongs on your nonstick pan though. That will scratch the surface and it will ruin your pan. So try to use tongs that have like the rubber coating if you have those. And if you don't, then just use a rubber spatula and like pick up the end of the tortillas and flip them over. You don't have to use your fingers like me. I probably shouldn't be, but I feel like since I have no fingerprints left anyway, what's the point? Okay, so these are nice and soft. I want to get them into this sheet of foil over here so that they stay nice and soft and hot and pliable for when I want to use them. So I just sandwich them up, just fold them up, make sure they're tight, cover them in the foil, make a little ball, keep them back here where they're nice and warm with my warm beans. And I'm going to leave this pan on because I'm going to go right into the fried eggs. I'm going to turn it back down to about a medium low because it's hot. It's a hot pan and I don't want my eggs to burn. So as I prepare for that, I'm going to get my eggs. I'm only making 2, like I said. I'm going to make them both in this one pan. You can make them individually so that each one is a perfect circle and put it on each tortilla. That's very nice for presentation. You don't have to do that. You can just make your 4 eggs and then break them up using a spatula. I'm just going to use a teeny touch of pan spray for this. I know I've got a great nonstick, but fried eggs can still be a hassle. So I'm going to crack my eggs on a flat surface. I like to do that rather than the sharp edge of the pan so I don't get cracked shell in my food. All right, so these are cooking up nice and quick. I'm going to salt and pepper the eggs because I always do. Just a teeny tiny pinch, not even a whole pinch. That was like a 1/16 of a teaspoon maybe. We've got a lot of flavor going on in this dish. It's not only going to come from the seasoning I add to the eggs, but it definitely makes the eggs taste better if you add a teeny touch of salt to them. So I'm going to do the trick that I just taught you. I'm going to avoid flipping these because I don't want to break the yolk. I want my yolk to be nice and runny. I'm going to put a lid on it and turn my heat off. All I'm looking for is a solidly cooked through white and a runny yolk. So I'm going to only leave this on for a minute or so, and I'm going to check it off. And I don't want to overcook my yolk. If you like your yolk cooked all the way, then put this lid on and get your other stuff ready and forget about it. Then the harder your yolk will be. So in the meantime, if you did need to keep anything else hot or warm, you know, the back of the oven when you've been cooking is usually a little bit of a warmer spot. I am going to sort of set up the station so that we are ready to build things. I can show everybody how I'm going to put mine together. Let's see. Yes, okay. So I've got very runny, jiggly yolks, but my whites are solidly cooked, so I'm going to remove that lid. I don't want it to keep cooking any longer on the top. Let's set this aside. The heat is off. The heat is off on everything. We are now in full-on assembly, almost eating mode. It's very exciting. Any other garnishes that you may want to have ready? You probably want to get that ready or set aside. If you need to shred any cheese, let's see, is this now too tall? Oh, it's okay, right? So I've got some avocado that we're going to slice and put on. I've got some of my shredded Monterey Jack cheese. Cotija I wanted to show you. Usually, this is the most common brand that you'll find in most of the supermarkets. They make a lot of different kinds of cheeses, usually of the Latin American variety. They make great queso. They even make really great manchego, which is a Spanish cheese. This is one of my favorite garnishes. It's a lot like feta in that it's a strong salted cheese, so you don't need very much. But it's a part skim cheese, which I really like, so it's kind of lower in fat in terms of like putting something on top. but it adds a lot of really, really yummy flavor, and it's just really nice and crumbly. And I like to have lots of different kinds of textures and visual things going on, and cotija adds some of that. So I'll show you here what it looks like. It's really, you just break off a little chunk, and then it crumbles up into your little, very much like feta. It's delicious. If you've never had it, highly recommend trying it. It's great on a lot of things. You probably have had it even if you didn't know it. It comes on top of a lot of things like black beans and stuff at certain restaurants and fast food places. So there's that. My avocado, I've cut in half already. Oh, it's perfect. That's always kind of a surprise and fun when it felt a little bruised on the outside, so I wasn't sure. So I'm just going to use one of the halves and cut little slits into it. I'm just slicing the avocado right in the shell. And I want to do that on the cutting board, not in my hand, just in case the knife goes through. And this way, I've got my sliced avocado ready to go, but it's not out of the shell going brown. It's just going to stay there ready for me to scoop out onto my food. So I'm going to build on my plate because then it's going to sit down and get eaten. I've got my 2 warm, soft tortillas still ready to go. We've got our black beans. They stayed pretty good. I don't want to add any more liquid to them because they're right at the right consistency. If they look a little bit dry, you can always add maybe just a squeeze of lime juice or maybe even a little olive oil. I'm going to spread these liberally with my delicious, very personally seasoned refried beans. If you have and like cilantro, you should chop it and put it in your salsa. You should chop it and put it on top. Get that away from me. It tastes like soap and I just can't do it. So I did not put any in my salsa, but it is traditionally in the pico de gallo. So I'm going to put some of my Monterey Jack on these warm beans because that's going to make it kind of nice and melty when I put my fried eggs on top. Trying to make it all very, very, very incorporated together. Let's see, I want to use a good spatula here. I'm just going to split my eggs apart. And I'm going to bring each one over. Oh, yeah. I am kind of tucking the edges under so that it sits nicely on the tortilla and looks a little pretty, because I really think that making your food beautiful is the best way to enjoy yourself, both cooking and eating. So we've got our eggs, beans, I've got some cheese under there. I'm going to spoon over some of our hot salsa, being careful not to put it on top of my yolks because it's hot and it will continue cooking the yolks underneath it. And I don't want that to happen. I want it to be really a nice runny yolk so that when I cut into it, it mixes with this hot salsa and all becomes a delicious sauce. Oh my gosh. Okay, then we're gonna spoon our pico de gallo. We definitely wanna use a slotted spoon while it's been sitting there and has become even more liquidy. And so you want to separate out as much of that water as you can and get some of that nice chunky tomato and onion action. I'm going to think about presentation here. I'm just gonna set some of this off on one side so I don't cover up all of my other salsa. Nice. Okay, we definitely need some green in here because I avoided the cilantro. We want to make sure that we have a lot of different color, because not only is that visually interesting, but the more colorful our food is usually, especially when it's natural food, then the more nutritious it is. We've got protein from the beans, protein from the eggs, got so much vitamin C, so many different nutrients, really amazing good fat from the avocado if you're using it, but also from the olive oil in the beans and good cholesterol from the eggs themselves. I'm going to then just scoop out the pre-sliced avocado, use my spoon, and it's just ready to fan out. I'm just going to nicely fan it out so that it still looks pretty. To the other one. And then I'm going to sprinkle with some cotija. Top it all off. From way up high. Get that flare going. All right. Moving some of this business out of the way. We have some really quite lovely Huevos Rancheros. That is a healthy, delicious, energy-packed breakfast. One of them would be enough for one person, clearly. I'm going to have breakfast and then save the other one for lunch. So I hope that yours turned out. If you were making it along with me, I would love to see how it worked. Send pictures, or you can turn on your camera. Yeah, if anyone has any questions. Okay, we'll deal with the recipe thing in a minute. If anybody has any questions about the recipe or how it turned out or any issues, you can definitely use other kinds of toppings. Chopped jalapeno would be really nice. Hot sauce, again, you can't forget the hot sauce. Everybody has their own personal favorite, depending on what you're using it for. I like tapatio on eggs. Everybody has their things with hot sauce, right? Like, it's good on this, it's great on that, like, whatever it's used for, it could be different. We had a quick class today. Breakfast is usually one of the fast ones, so I'm not going to rush anybody off, but that is Huevos Rancheros. Like I said, if anybody does have any questions, go ahead. You can just unmute yourself at that point about the recipe and stuff. The beans, they will last in your fridge in a Tupperware or something for the week. You know, you've got refried beans to use if you have leftovers from that. The salsa that you made, that will last for a few days, just depending on how ripe and ready your tomatoes were. But it's really great on a lot of different things, that kind of pico de gallo. You can put it on a salad, you can put it in a burrito, you can mix it into your scrambled eggs, or even use it as a marinade for like fish or chicken. I like to do that, just soak some chicken in a salsa like that, really kind of get the acids working, and then sear it and bake it. You know, pretty simple, straightforward kind of flavor to put into a quick and easy dish. So, yeah, I hope that you guys really enjoyed this. I'm going to stop recording. Thank you for being here. I am going to talk to this about the